Welcome to Bonehead Weekly. Sorry we've missed a couple of weeks.
Wait,
I
I
blame
lied.
it.
I wasn't ready.
I
Oh,
blame it.
well, now we got to do it all over again.
I
Damn
blame
it.
This
it on
time,
everyone else but me.
well, that's actually it's the biggest problem in the world is other people.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. And scheduling them.
And people though, the funny thing about people, Joe, is people have the most fun. It's a conundrum. One of them
But
there
people be
conundrum.
peopling.
Yeah. To
They
quote
people.
IT crowd people, what a bunch of bastards.
Yeah, that's accurate. That's accurate. Now, after James is done talking about the it crowd, I swear to God, the first time I saw it, I didn't know it was the IT crowd.
Well, I think that's intentional, and I think
Oh, I,
actually
I
there's
get it.
probably
I'm just a dumb American who didn't
there's
know.
probably a ton of people that actually call it that, and I'm the one that keeps saying IT crowd. Because
The it.
why don't they do a crossover with that clown that lives in Derry? That could be a
I
good.
don't know.
It meets the IT crowd this week on Scooby Doo Mysteries.
I'd like that.
I'd
So,
watch it
Chad came up with a topic tonight, as I
Yes, I did.
recall, like 3 hours
all
ago.
by
Notice
himself. He did this all by
all by
himself.
himself with
Didn't
James
have
mocking
any
him
input whatsoever.
viciously. A couple of the mocks even funny. I don't remember which one. There was one.
I don't know, something about a mock turtleneck.
Eh,
No,
eh.
that never happened.
I don't know if I've ever seen him
Mock
in a
turtlenecks
turtleneck.
never happened. The '60s called. They'd like you to review the fashion.
He kind of looked like a circumcised penis.
Wasn't born, didn't exist.
Your
Oh,
penis?
you're one of those people.
Moon landing, don't get me started.
God, it came back up again in the last few weeks.
What? You're arguing with people about the moon landing?
All I can
No,
look
I
at the
don't.
flag. The flag is weird.
I walk away from it. God, there's two or three things that just I get it. Polarized country. I'm trying to do better.
I'm
Problem is
not.
that
I'm
I
getting
live with all
worse.
these assholes.
And the
That being
grassy knoll, man. Like I said,
that being
he
said,
didn't back and to the left, motherfuckers.
you all there's a couple that I just can't get past. And if you think that the world is flat,
Oh God. We don't want to go here, Joe. It's irritating nonsense.
well, I just don't want to talk to you. I don't think I'm being mean. What do you two
Well,
think?
and here's the thing about that. Let's say
Unless I am
hypothetically.
really intoxicated and am bored and you are pitching me your ideas, I might listen then.
You know what I find funny about that though, and somebody pointed this out
This
to me.
isn't our topic, sorry,
I
but you
think
No.
I think this is a good point though to make because it's kind of like just as, somebody said it this way to me, and I'm like, okay, that's probably a touche point, and probably why we need to stop trying. And what I mean by that is somebody pointed out to me that is there anything they can say to convince you that they're right? And I
no.
said, probably not. No, I mean, you're going to have a really hard time
Yeah.
convincing me. We have photos from space. It's a ball.
Well, no,
And they said the problem is though, there's nothing you can say that can convince them. So you're
Well,
both
no.
in your little echo chamber shouting,
well, no,
and it
it's
doesn't matter.
oh God, Joe,
Doesn't
help
matter.
me. What's his
What?
name?
Who?
The
Kubrick?
the amazing
Yuva
physicist,
Bowl.
no, or
Neil
astronomer.
deGrasse Tyson?
Thank you. He there was an amazing interview he did where he was talking about the people who didn't believe in the moon landing and that the Earth was flat. And he goes, they talked about the old footage, and he goes, okay, look, I understand your points. Then he showed them the new footage. Well, look at this and look at this and look how this is done and look at the and all they did was come back with more of the same. And he goes, oh, okay, I understand. You're not willing to hear
Yeah, that's what I mean.
the
Yeah.
other side. Yeah, no, that's what I'm just saying. Is it? I was just talking about somebody smarter than you.
Oh,
Then
so
James,
everybody, everybody.
I don't think he can believe that's possible.
What? No, there's listen. I passed a dead squirrel on the side of the road, and it was way smarter than I was. At least it had the dignity to die.
Well, that's probably smarter than all of us. Is you realize it's all futile, none of it matters. Let's quote Jimmy Lannister at the end of, and none of it matters. Let's walk out in front of this car. We're all
No,
headed
well,
towards
that's
oblivion.
actually that's
I told James that, and yesterday I walked face first into a bathroom door. So yeah, there you go.
that's the oh
They shouldn't have hung one of them mirrors.
it's in mythology, but Nietzsche quotes it too. It's the idea um what's the only thing better than dying before you have sense? It's to never be born at all, right? And
Mhm.
I mean it's a Greek tragedy trope, but
Well,
Nietzsche quotes it.
this is comedy. This right here, this is like rich dirt of comedy. We're
It is,
digging
you know
in.
why it's a rich dirt of comedy?
Which
Nobody's
is not the
listening.
most eloquent way to put it. I came up
No,
with all
no,
those
it's
names earlier, and all I could come up with
no.
was rich dirt.
We know
I
you
could
want to
have said
fertilize the dirt, Joe. We know you want to just fertilize it, get in there, and
And
fertilize
by the
that
way,
dirt
for the
so
people who
hard.
the people who listen to us on the audio, I made the first joke about the moon landing. Do me a favor, uh, go to YouTube and look at the hat I'm wearing, and that should say it all. There you go.
That it's a
That's,
corn beaver.
it's the normal corn belters in
Hmm.
Illinois.
Yeah, I cannot remember what the B stood for.
I
Corn
like
did just
corned
didn't seem
beavers.
accurate. I like
Can you
corn beavers
that
too.
corned beef is like they would have like they'd have a because they chew their own bats, right? That's how they'd get
Ooh,
bats. They would gnaw
yeah.
them till they were bat shaped.
Corn
I
beavers.
think that's how it goes.
And for a split second, the whole time you were saying bats, I was actually thinking like tweet, 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 tweet. And why my
And
bats
Oh my
sound like a
god!
and
fucking
speaking
robin, I
of
have no
That's a
idea.
horror movie right there. When the corned beavers get into the bat population, that's
and
just
And they're
oh
making
and
them
man.
as yeah.
and speaking of bats, let's talk about Batman and his sidekick Robin, and let's talk
Nightwing.
about our topic of the show, our most
Yes.
favorite sidekicks.
You know, and I was gonna say, do we want to do like go round robin like we normally do, or just talk about sidekicks in general? Because you brought up Robin, and I
I
was thinking
agree.
about
Let's do
this.
something different.
Well, here's what I was saying about the gestalt of sidekicks. Often,
Just wanted to say fucking just stop.
actually, somebody actually, I was in a meeting and
He had
somebody,
a plethora of reasons, a myriad, if you
this is a
will.
true story. I was in a meeting with people that outrank me, which is most everybody. But literally,
We don't.
somebody made the comment.
I ain't nobody.
They go and they were like, "Well, how can we tell if students are using artificial intelligence?" And somebody in the room literally said, "Unless it's James Thomas, if you read apropos of nothing in a paper." And I was like, "Do I really say apropos of nothing that much?" And they're like, "It's in about 1 out of every 10 of your emails." And I literally looked back and I'm like, "Gee, I do say apropos of nothing in
You should
emails." So,
really listen to this podcast.
um,
You should sometimes just listen to yourself.
so I should not listen to myself. That's a fool's quest, sir. I recommend people don't listen to me except for on this show. Please don't turn us off. This is all we have. But
I
anyway,
mean, do you also throw in Harlan Ellison when you're on there with them?
every blue moon, I'll actually, I last year our conference, the Organization of Educational Historians, I got them to theme around
The
an entire.
party, the party historians.
Um, listen, we go hard. Um,
I heard
and what's
that.
funny is everybody assumes academic stuff is boring, and then you meet some of these people that are, and I say it not
And it
jokingly.
confirms it.
No, there's some man. There's a couple Hunter S. Thompson characters that I don't care what field you're in.
Oh, that's true.
And I mean this honestly. There's probably a few people that you'd be like, I don't know how this person survived. And I'm not besmirching that organization, and I'm not speaking specifically about that organization, but I have been in a couple places where I'm like, man, these people party harder than I do. Anyway,
I
the
like the
point being,
beaver bat wing
the
bat
gestalt
thing better.
of the sidekick. I was saying about this, Chad. You brought up Batman, and Batman was always dark, like blue or black or gray. Robin was red, right, red
Right.
or yellow, and all that. And so I was thinking about it as we kind of approach this. Um, there's a lot, especially in comic books, where the hero, the sidekick, represents kind of not a complete opposite, but a bit of an opposite. Another example is, for instance, I know you're a fan of Green Arrow. See,
So
that
he
opposite
had
was
Speedy.
because Green Arrow was not on heroin and Speedy was.
Yeah.
So there's these opposite, and that came to mind because it was an easy joke. But I do think it's true in comic books, especially the classic comics, Batman, Robin. The sidekick tends to be, and you would actually take it back further. I would argue, there's only 4 Sherlock Holmes stories that are not told by Watson. And the reason is Sherlock narrating himself comes across as a jerk.
Right.
Because he is, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, he's not capable of socializing, and so there's only
He's
4.
basically on the spectrum before it was ever a thing.
Yeah, yeah. He is
Right.
he is so brilliant that
They based it off that show House.
yeah. That's what it was, Joe. I'll tell you
Sure.
later. Joe doesn't believe in a flat Earth, but he also doesn't believe history existed before House. Um,
House. Or the
Which both
monkeys.
of both of those were ripped off of Columbo.
yeah, sure.
I do. Do you know? Do you actually want a short anecdote about the Columbo ripoff?
Not really.
I'm going to tell you anyway. To his dying day, William Peter Blatty said Detective Kinnaman, specifically out of the novel The Exorcist, is that's Columbo. They ripped him off.
Okay. Wait, they ripped off Columbo
Columbo
from The
ripped them
Exorcist.
off because Detective Kinnaman acted specifically in the book, and you get a little bit of it from Lee Cobb in the first movie. He's played by somebody, played by George
Yeah.
C. Scott later in Exorcist Legion or Exorcist 3,
Yeah.
but that's Detective Kinnaman. That his mannerisms, the way just one more question, a lot of that stuff's in the book.
Why has that never been a prequel?
Hmm.
The Exorcist Detective. Like we've got a lot of ones about the religious side of it. I think it would be great to do a detective show. And by the way, we'll write that today.
Yep.
Anyway,
Anyway,
but
you were
yeah,
saying
so I think so to that point though, I think it's really fascinating that sidekicks sometimes function as a way to bring us into the world when the hero is just too unapproachable, right? Sherlock Holmes is, Um,
hot.
but at the same time, usually the sidekick's a little bit of an opposite from the hero.
But that makes
Yeah,
sense as far as the story structure goes. You don't need the two of the same. Unless it's the
No, no, I
ambiguously gay
agree.
duo. Gary and I don't ever remember the other one's name.
I,
Is it Scott?
Is it
I
Scott?
don't.
Gary and Scott? Probably. But I mean they're the same character is what I'm saying.
They're
Is
the
that,
same.
but
Yeah, yeah.
normally though, the sidekick, of course, is a little different or the antithesis of because that's conflict in which conflict is all drama. That's drama.
Why do you think though, generally speaking, that's less common for the villain sidekick? Like Starscream's not the polar opposite of
Yeah,
um
that's a good point. I don't know. Some of them, it depends. There's got to be
no,
a good
see, I
villain
disagree.
sidekick.
I think I disagree. He is the polar opposite of Megatron because Megatron's this strong leader
is he though?
who uses his force, where Starscream is just a manipulative underling who does what he can to undermine him to get his way to the top.
Could you make an argument that Megatron is for the good of the Decepticons and Starscream only wants power for himself?
Yes.
I don't know if I believe what I just
I
said.
was gonna say I don't think
I
that's
don't
true
know
because
that. I don't know if
could,
they delve that deep into it, but
I don't think Megatron would step down if it was for the good of the people. Like if there was
By the way,
if
the ambiguous
Starscream
gay
could make a
duo is
point.
Ace and Gary.
Ace, it's Ace. I thought it was an A, but for some reason I couldn't think of what
I
A
thought it
would
was an
be.
A, so I kept calling him Glenn.
I figured eventually he'd just give up.
You say Scott?
Clarence, just let me know when I'm getting close.
What does James just keep looking? Is there ghosts over to your right, sir? Is that you keep
No,
looking up?
I was thinking
Just
there
doing
is
this.
stuff over here to the right. I'm surrounded by bookshelves, and movie shelves, as would
Too
be
bad
here
there's
right
no
now.
books on them
Um,
because you burnt them.
but I think that the interesting part about that is so if we expand this out a little bit more, and if y'all have lists of sidekicks, I think we can just throw them
I'm
out
willing to do
here.
you any way you want.
But
Yeah.
I think what's interesting is, again, I don't think it works as well for villainous type characters if it's the opposite because they'd be good, right? Like, I mean, and obviously sidekicks are good too. They're just not as good as a hero is. Like
Well,
Robin is not as good as Batman as far as, because Batman always has to, if we go back even to the 1960 show, right? It's like, well, chum, we have to look at it this way, right? There's always that, let me keep training you. Let me keep, I don't know.
yeah. But it also depends on the story. If we're talking about basic, I'm trying to think of the word I want to use. Melodrama, simple kind of B story or a story that's very simplistic. Then of course the characters are more simplistic. There's not as much depth. But if you take a show like The Sopranos, Tony is clearly the main, and Chad. It was interesting actually. I didn't think about it so much until you brought it up, or I don't remember which one of you brought it up now about the villains. I thought it was Chad and their sidekicks. Who is are all the sidekicks in, or is Tony the main villain and all the rest of them sidekicks? And of course, they're going to be more interesting because it's a much more in-depth show, and you have time
See,
to play
I
all that
always
out. Whereas you got a
and
comic
see
book, it's more
like
simplistic.
with villains, there's underlings, but then there's always that one right hand man. The one who's his confidant, and
Like
that's who I
Soundwave.
who yeah, and that's who
Soundwave.
I yeah Soundwave. So I never considered Starscream his sidekick. I said Soundwave was his sidekick because Soundwave was his confidant who would get the job done for Megatron.
So are villain sidekicks less interesting depending on the genre?
It depends. It really
See what I mean,
does.
though? If you go like a show like The
Because
Sopranos, they're all
Sopranos, I
bad.
always with Sopranos, I always viewed E Street Band guy.
I
Little,
know exactly
little
who you're talking about. I
Yeah,
just appreciate E Street Band guy.
Van Zant.
Van Sant. I thought he was his sidekick.
Yeah.
So, and he was there, but he wasn't as interesting as Tony.
No. In fact, he's
Like
probably
with
one
the
of the
villain, like in
least
the
interesting
villains, the
characters
villains.
of all of them. He's
But
nowhere near as interesting as Chris Moltisanti, backstory
yeah,
wise. Sorry, I
right.
didn't mean to interrupt you, but
No, I just said sometimes, yeah, the villain, like for example, Frankenstein. I don't know. Do you consider him a villain? So Igor, you know, not really
which is something
as
that came into the movies later.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. He didn't come in until what?
I think the third one.
Yeah, yeah, the third one played by Boris or not Bella.
yeah.
Am I right?
Yeah, I think it was the third one. Um,
I don't. I'm really seriously. We'd have to have Joe down.
Boris Karloff wasn't Frankenstein in that one.
Mm,
No. So let me ask you all a question, and I'm gonna lead a little bit with this question.
No, you're not.
Um, by saying, let me throw out some information first. So I think if you're of a certain age, a little bit older than we are, I would argue, quite a bit older than we are in many cases. But an example that comes to mind, and it comes to my mind because my father watched the reruns of the Lone Ranger all the time. You have the Lone Ranger and Tonto, but is
yeah.
Tonto a sidekick, or is he just a fellow hero?
Is that it? Depends on the interpretation of the Lone Ranger.
And that's what I was thinking, because I mean there's a lot of quote unquote origin stories of the Lone Ranger that say Tonto saved him,
Yeah,
Hmm.
and
redeemed him.
see, that's what I was going to bring up too, because the other side of that is the Green Hornet and Kato, because Kato is the true hero in that duo, because Kato has all the capabilities. He has the martial arts. He has the ability. He has the car. He does the inventions. He's the true hero. The Green Hornet is like he's Batman, but he doesn't have any of the skills Batman does. Kato does.
Well, and that's and what really,
But Kato's considered the sidekick.
yeah. Well, and part of that is that, and this is what I find interesting about, and again, I just know some of this from my father talking about how big the Lone Ranger was when he was a kid. Um, you know, Tonto had his own fan club, which was, this is very dated, I know,
But
but
Robin has his own side.
So
it
did
was called the
Spock.
Tom Tom Club, and it was for people that were more obsessed with Tonto than they were the Lone Ranger. and it was hugely popular.
Because here's the thing, Joe said, Joe said, Joe said sometimes the villain, the main antagonist, the sidekicks are never as interesting. It's the reverse when it's the protagonist. Sometimes the sidekick is more interesting.
I mean, there's a whole movie made that way. It's called Big Trouble in Little China.
Yes, exactly. And you know what's happened, unfortunately, and it's sad that Michael Bay has done to this to us. He made Bumblebee more interesting than Optimus Prime.
But
Ye-
I think,
well, he produced them. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I
well,
guess if you consider through those movies, he did make
Yeah,
Bumblebee more
he
but
interesting.
through all those movies. Now a lot of the times Bumblebee over he overshadows Optimus Prime, which just makes me sick to my core.
but I'll be honest, Chad, and this probably says something about how I tend to idolize the secondary characters more than I do the primary
If he
characters.
says he likes Bumblebee, I'm going to punch him in his
I
throat.
I grew
I
up.
like
Bumblebee was my primary
I will say Bumblebee's
Autobot when I
slightly
was a
more
kid.
interesting too.
Oh, y'all are
When I was a kid,
fucking sick
well,
to your.
because I I
I don't
this
care
is
for either,
I'm
but
an introvert, but I'm also a
I mean, neither one
pessimist.
was my favorite character either. But the fact that
I,
you say that,
I'm
ugh.
an introvert, and I'm a pessimist. There is nobody as good as Optimus Prime. That was too much fiction for me, even as a kid. I
yeah, it's
could
the
not
same problem
believe
I
that
have with
existed.
Superman. Yeah.
Right, and
Yeah,
I agree. Like the Superman stories that I find, and I grew up reading Superman comics. The ones that were really interesting were the stories that dealt with the fact that he couldn't save everybody.
yeah.
Mhm.
That was the weight that he had to bear.
Don't
That
get me
he,
wrong. Like I said, my favorite character, my favorite Transformer was a Hall. So there. I mean,
but
yeah.
I mean, so
He's wrong in
I
some
think
way.
there's something fascinating, and that's why when you came up with this topic, Chad, I think that's what really was appealing about it was this idea that um
I love how he net. Did you see what he just did?
I sure did. I sure did.
He just.
I'll stick with it. I'm gonna no, we're riding this trope out.
You're going to
I'm
convince
just your
yourself that I
willing
came up with it.
sidekick. What do I know? Um, but I think the other trope about it is there's sidekicks. The pop culture jokes about sidekicks have also became that they're disposable. Like even in the show Dinosaurs, right? The Mr. Wizard parody that they had on dinosaurs.
I
We're
don't
gonna need
remember it.
another Timmy. Like his assistant was always called Timmy, and Timmy always met a horrible end. And so I think there's really something interesting about the fact that that's a trope that in some ways, especially in comedic readings, the sidekick's replaceable.
Is
And actually, Chad,
replaceable,
let's go ahead.
and if not replaceable, the one you can do the most physical and emotional damage to.
Wait, I want to correct myself. I said Hall. I meant to say Hoist was my favorite Transformer. I don't know why I
You
said
just
Hall.
like it because it's
You couldn't even say Soundwave
I
correctly.
I'm fucking up.
you just like him because he's awfully close to moist, and you love saying the word moist over and over.
Moist and panty.
Um,
That just
by the
killed
way,
us the
Chad,
rest
though,
of our audience.
Chad,
No,
I
wait.
wanted to bring this
It
up
was Hoist
because
and Wheeljack were my two favorites.
oh yeah,
Once again, why can't he say the two words sound wave?
but Chad, actually, I thought you would bring this up, and maybe you were going to, and I've ruined it by not following any sort of order. But I think one of the most interesting
I can't
commentaries.
tell if that was a jab or
It's
just
not. It's
It's
not because
not. I didn't tell
I
you.
think Chad has
it sounded
will
like one.
will really have insight into this. I'm being honest. Jeez, the one time I'm sincere
I'm
and you
being
belittle it.
honest. I mean, he's really going to have
Jeez,
insight into it. It's
no,
not like he's got any
because I
order
think
or
one of the
anything.
best I, I want to say comedic, but also it's done very very well readings of sidekicks in general is the Venture Brothers.
Yeah.
That the
Well,
way Monarch treats his sidekicks, and then he has the one not his sidekicks, his underlings, and then the way sidekicks are, the fact that Venture is quote unquote the main character, but really Brock's the one that does everything, or not does everything, but you know what I mean. And so I
yeah.
think that's such a great analysis of how we view heroes and villains sarcastically through this idea of sidekicks and minions.
Yeah. What is it? Henchman 21? Is that his name?
Is that the one that breaks off and kind of does his own thing? And
Well, he's Henchman 21's the one who ends up he's the fat guy,
Mhm.
and he ends up being by the end he becomes this big muscular jock who ends up being able to kick everybody's ass, but he's still this nerdy little dude. Um, it's crazy. Yeah, I just yeah, Henchman 21 and then Henchman 24. Those are technically his sidekicks.
To bring it back, why do you think as a society we love beating the shit out of or emotionally abusing sidekicks? I was waiting for Chad to say the best sidekick of all time, or at least his favorite, I assumed, is probably one of the most abused characters in history,
Snidely
physically.
Whiplash, or not Snidely? What's the dog? Muttley.
I
And
don't know
that's not Muttley.
which one are you talking about?
It is a Muppet.
Oh, Beaker. Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
physically probably one of the most abused characters in
I
history.
honestly never considered him a sidekick. He didn't make my list. I never considered him a sidekick. But I mean, there's that whole joke about this in the Tick. When Arthur and Tick go out for a night out and they go to the superhero club and they won't let Arthur in. They because all the sidekicks get abused. He sends them to the little shack behind the bar, and it's just all the little sidekicks sitting in a shack talking to one another. And they get no, it's just this trope of sidekicks are just there basically as a target.
Well, and that's the movie Superhero High, Disney
Yeah.
movie, where Bruce Campbell plays the gym teacher who decides whether you're a hero or a sidekick. And Kurt Russell plays the big Superman type character in that. And everybody assumes his son's not going to be a sidekick. And then, spoiler, he ends up a sidekick.
But
Well, that's not going to work out.
No, Kurt Russell ain't going to stand for that. He's going to get that guy that helped him in Big Trouble in Little China, and they're going to come down there and fix. No, anyway, but so
That's
I
a
think you're
long
right.
way
I
for
didn't
a
think
beat
about it
tail.
that way, Chad. But
yeah,
that's the other way that I thought about it. Like when you were talking about it, I'm like, oh, I mean, even Disney has played with that idea that the sidekick is a lesser than or uh and not only a lesser than will never be more than a sidekick.
yeah. And the other trope of this too is sidekicks who don't want to admit they're the sidekick or who refuse to accept it. Like one of my favorite, Bender,
Yeah.
because he even said there's even a whole joke in it where they talk about him being the sidekick and he goes off on a tangent. He goes, "I am not the sidekick. He's the sidekick."
You know,
But
in my heart, Bender
uh,
is in my heart. It is Fry. It's not Bender.
yeah,
I know it is. I
Bender
know the story is based around Fry.
Bender is the true but yeah, unfortunately Bender is labeled as the sidekick, but Bender's the one who does all the great things.
But it would they be great without Fry there? Like I think that's one of the things that Fry humanizes what Bender does.
I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the episode, but where he gets shot into space and becomes God.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know, man. That's one of the best episodes of television I've ever seen.
Oh, yeah. Well, I actually Futurama has so many great episodes
It
anyway. I
does.
mean, everybody points to the Seymour one and the God
Because
one.
it is so good. The
It is
dog
so good.
one is the dog one is
Yeah. The Seymour
fantastic.
one is it is only it's one of those rare times that a laugh out loud comedy ended on just suck all the air out of the room, that last scene of that episode.
Yeah,
Mhm.
it is truly depressing. That's why the God episode gets better, right? It gets a better pick for me.
But yeah, I think you're right. It's really but going back to the idea that you can abuse the sidekick, is that
And
just
Bender,
an easy
and the thing is, Bender gets abused quite a bit, but so does Fry. So
Yeah, well, and it's actually you made me think of one of my favorite Bender things ever. It's where he's sleep bending and he's bending people, and the
mhm.
professor. I don't know why that episode gets me every time. The professor walking in bent backwards, and he's like, "Oh, I can see things now." Like, I don't know why it gets me. Anyway, but so I've got a question. Do you think the sidekick being abused, and I think about one of the prime examples of that is the death of Robin, the second Robin, if you're keeping track.
Yeah.
Jason
Well,
Todd,
there's been four,
yeah,
five.
yeah, yeah. Oh, and if you go into Elseworlds and alternate universe and potential futures, there's been about eight.
Yeah.
But the replacement Robin after Dick Grayson
Jason
became
Todd.
Nightwing.
You're talking about Jason Todd.
Yes, Dick Grayson. But for those that don't know, Dick Grayson was the original one. He became Nightwing, and eventually he got a new Robin because the kid tried to steal the wheels off the Batmobile. True story.
Hmm.
Um, and he goes, "Oh, if the kid can, hotwire the Batmobile, probably should work for me." I'm simplifying that a lot, but anyway, he ends up getting killed by the Joker.
Yeah,
Um,
bashed
and
in the head
so
with a crowbar and then blown
crowbar.
up.
Yeah. Yeah, and by the way, fans got to vote before. Hey, listen, you American Idol people, before you were doing it, comic books did it. Fans got to vote on whether or not Robin died,
But
and
he was so universally hated that they
well,
just
because he was a punk. I
right.
mean, what is that? 80s? He was an
Hmm.
80s era street tough punk. Of course, he was hated. He
Yeah,
was. It was basically comics saying, "Oh, we won't give you another goody goody Robin. We're going to give you a Robin with some edge." And it was kind of, I mean, for lack of a better term, if you want me to do another pop culture illusion, he was the Poochie of Robins. It was, what can we do to get kids to read this comic again, and all this stuff, and it was, oh, we'll give them a Robin they can relate to because he's going to be edgy. If it would have been a few years later, he would have been grunge Robin. I mean, so um, with that being said, though, do you think that I don't? I'm not saying that started the trend, but do you think that furthered the trend, or is part of that trend to say abuse the sidekick all you want? All it does, because after that, and I'll be honest, I was reading the Batman comics around that time, and that's actually when I more or less started to discover Batman, and the stories got really great because Batman started brooding more about I can't have another Robin, he'll just die.
hmm.
And there were a lot of those comics where it's like, I should never have had a sidekick. I don't want another sidekick. This is all terrible. And it made Batman have more depth. It made Batman more interesting that he lost his sidekick and couldn't get over it. And
Yeah, I
eventually they
mean,
brought him back. But the point being,
being the comic book person, I always enjoy it when the superhero does not have a sidekick. When they smack one on and I have to deal with the banter and the fact that that person's there, it just throws me off. Um, except the only time I don't mind it is when it is, well, yeah, it even bothers me with Robin, and I do like the Tim Drake version, which was the one after Jason Todd.
yeah,
But I never cared for Damian, which is Batman's son. Um,
that he didn't know he had
yes,
as the
um,
world turned.
but other sidekicks like Aqualad and um, Speedy. Whenever they joined the comic books, I was always never really interested in having them there. They never brought anything to the story.
Well, and a lot of that was, I mean, I would assume fallout from Robin being popular back
Yeah.
in the day,
Hmm.
right? Robin was popular, so everybody needs, except
Well,
Superman.
that's how we got the Teen Titans, is because the
Yeah,
Teen Titans was a group of superhero, a group of sidekicks who joined to create their own superhero team.
yeah, but Superman never had. I mean, he had Crypto,
Well,
but you know what I mean.
eventually he had Superboy,
Yeah, but
and then
yes,
I believe he had a Super Horse at one time.
I thought that was Supergirl.
Maybe it was Supergirl.
I think it was because she had to have a pony because she
Yeah,
was a
yeah,
girl.
you're
I'm
right.
not
You're
being
right.
sexist. That was the argument at the time, because there was Crypto the Super Dog. There was a Super Horse I'm forgetting the name of. Batman had the dog,
Batman had Bat Hound, yeah.
and then who had the
Bat
monkey?
Hound?
Yep.
Bat Hound. That wasn't made up for that movie.
What
The
movie?
The
the
Super
Super
Pets.
Pets movie.
Oh, I
I
don't.
thought you had to watch
That.
that with your
Oh, I
kid.
did. That one went through one eyeball and out the other one. I don't. The Rock and the
Kevin
other
Hart.
guys in that. Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
but I mean, all of that is back in the comics in the
And what's her
'60s.
face is the villain.
Can't
Katie
remember.
Kate McKinnon. Kate McKinnon. She's a really talented one.
Yes.
Kate McKinnon's the voice of the villain. I don't remember anything about. I'm
I never
sorry.
got through it.
I have sat through it. I have sat through it. Yeah, at least
Um,
once.
But we got to talk about another sidekick that I can't believe we haven't brought up yet because Jane. So Joe said Spock
Yeah.
earlier, and
I don't.
I don't see Spock as a sidekick.
Well, can you lead me to, can I, that the reason I'm trying to get in here, and now that you all, if you don't mind, Spock and a few others on many sidekick lists are can be questionable. Now, I don't disagree so much with Spock, although Spock's popularity was right there with, and it only rose as the series went on,
Oh
but it
yeah.
was right there with Kirk. But another one that I don't know that I completely agree with is Buzz Lightyear. He's on a ton of sidekick lists, and I don't know that I get that Woody's kind of the main character, but I don't know that
But then
that's the same way as the story arc goes through those first three movies.
then I don't see how you can call Spock a sidekick if you can't see Buzz Lightyear as a sidekick.
Uh, by the way,
Well,
Chad,
Buzz Lightyear is the one who imposes his, who comes, if you look at the first, if you just look at the first movie, Buzz Lightyear is the one who takes Woody's place.
by the way, Chad, let me push up my glasses here, and just so we don't get comments on it later. The horse was Supergirl's, and its name was Comet. And sometimes she would claim that Comet was her boyfriend in the comics, which, and this was the 1960s, but I think we need to break that down and have a conversation. I'm worried about
Somebody's
Supergirl more
going to
now than ever.
Mexico.
By the way, Superman had a monkey and a cat.
Oh,
He did have the monkey. He had Beppo the super monkey, of course, but Streaky the super cat is who we were leaving out. I would not want to leave out the super cat. So actually, Superman had three pets: the monkey, the cat, and the dog. Batman had the dog. Supergirl had the horse. Aquaman had the entire flipping ocean because that was kind
Had we moved on
of
to the
his.
next one,
Go ahead, Joe. What do you got going on?
I don't remember who I am. But back to Buzz, I
Listen,
think
you need to
if you
know about
just,
Comet the Super Horse in 1962.
as the series went on, I think he probably did. I misspoke. I meant to flip it. As the series went on, I think they made him more into a sidekick. But if you just consider the first Toy Story movie, he's he's the he is the antagonist to Woody. That's how Woody views him. He's his
yeah,
replacement.
but you just can't consider the first one. You have to consider the whole
And
series.
he's the one that got, and I will, and if you do that, I would also say he's the one that got his own series. Was it
Yeah,
Woody?
yeah. I mean, I think the problem with that is
And
that
his own spin-off movie.
I would argue that really I would argue Rex is much more the sidekick than Bud.
Oh well, actually, the sidekick to Woody is Slinky.
Yeah, yeah. Like that's yeah. I don't.
It's Slinky Dog. Slinky, the one that goes along with everything he says, supports him all the way, is always trying to,
Yeah, it's true.
yeah.
Hmm.
It's Slinky Dog. Hmm.
I'm not arguing with you. I'm just
Why is
saying
Spock not? What do you think? I mean, he is a
because
he is a
Spock is
science
his
officer.
equal.
And Spock. Well, I would argue though that Spock
He's more
also
than his equal in his intelligence, but for rank, he's not his equal.
no, but he disagrees with him a lot.
Well, Kirk
Like it,
allows it.
what? But you know what I'm saying? Like I think, and
Yeah,
the problem there is, and I say this is the original series nerd. That show doesn't work if you don't have three.
agreed.
It takes three. If you don't have McCoy, and that was something I was reading the other day
I agree.
because there's a lot of conspiracy theories going around on how Strange New World is going to eventually deal with the Doctor situation. Because what is already canon, you do have, Doctor Mbanga, but you also had Doctor Piper and Doctor Hoyt, and
Hmm.
none of them have been mentioned yet. And if you watch The Cage, let me push up my glasses. See, Joe, if you watch The Cage, Doctor Hoyt is the one. Pike even has the line, "You're one of the few people I can talk to. You're also my bartender." Right? And there's this sense that there's been this long relationship, and he ain't showed up yet. And so it's very interesting because now, as we're waiting for the third season and they're currently filming the fourth season, a lot of people are saying, "Well, wait a second," because one of the conspiracy theories is eventually they'll introduce a young McCoy as a second shift doctor or something to slowly build him in
I don't know.
the
The way we're
way.
going, we're never going to get another season.
Um,
They're all
what?
going to
No.
die before the show gets made again.
Oh no, no. Season 3 premieres this fall. It's already filmed. Season 4 is getting filmed now.
No, it's not.
Yeah, it is, dude. Listen,
Joe.
Chad, Chad,
No.
Chad, 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 Chad. If there's something geeky Star Trek related, you may know other things, but believe me, I'm on the message boards every day.
Let me. Should I go back to that moon landing thing?
Oh
No,
my God.
no.
They can't trek through the stars because they can't get a big enough running jump to get off this flat Earth.
I'm glad we're finally getting a new season. I've been waiting forever.
By
But
the
anyway,
way,
yeah, no, I just have a hard time
But
considering Spock a
well,
sidekick.
and I think the other reason is going back to actually what you said, Joe. The problem is that in all fairness, they're not spinoffs, but Spock has outlived everybody else.
yeah,
I know
he's out.
I know this is a bad comparison, but off the top of my head, it's literally the only thing I can come up with. Look at the A team. You have Murdoch, Baracus, Face, and oh my God, why am I forgetting the leader's name?
Hannibal,
Hannibal.
George Papard. Where are you?
I'm having a hard time tonight. Hannibal is literally the leader, but are any of the any of those sidekicks? No.
No, because they're
No,
Because
the
it's the
guest
same
of the week is the sidekick.
I like George Papard. I of course don't go back and watch the 18. I tried watching an episode a few years ago. It's hard to make your way through it as an adult.
I know because you're overwhelmed by the awesomeness and that soundtrack.
And Sid Haig was
That
in this
soundtrack.
episode, and I kept watching because of Sid, and he was just phoning it in. But I don't know. I would say Hannibal's the least interesting of those characters.
Well, yeah, but
Well,
that's what I'm
Howling
saying.
Mad Murdoch.
I'm not
probably the
saying
most
about that. I'm
interesting.
just saying,
He's howling mad.
He's
but are
Howling
any
Mad.
of them sidekicks? No, and that's what I look at Star Trek as in that, yeah, Shatner's the leader, but Spock and Bones and Scotty, they're not sidekicks. They're,
But
I don't
And
see them.
about one out of every 5 episodes, somebody else is running the Enterprise. Either
Well,
Spock is having to do it because Kirk is lost, or Scotty's doing it because they're both lost or on a planet, or you know what I mean. So I think that's the challenge too.
Yeah, Kirk's off screwing something up because he's an idiot and he's no
he's not
Picard.
screwing something up, sir. He is screwing
He's no
something.
Picard.
Some usual blue lady.
He's trying to get a rise out of me, and I'm going to let him do it this time because he picked this episode topic, and I want him to have this. He needs it.
None of them are
mean,
Cisco.
I just remember.
I'll be
him
honest,
picking
Cisco
it.
is. I mean, Kirk's my favorite.
Oh
'cause
my
it's what I grew
God!
up
Why
watching.
did you do
But
this,
Cisco,
Chad?
Cisco,
Son
I
of a
agree.
bitch.
It's the second most fascinating character.
Cisco's still my favorite. I don't care what anybody says.
Cisco,
Yes,
I
but
mean,
you
as far
got
as
him
watching
off
and
of
as far as
Cisco.
being a fully realized character and not an archetype, there you go. So here's a question: who's Cisco's sidekick? If we assume
His
Spock is a
dumbass
sidekick,
kid.
Cisco's sidekick would be oh
What's her
God,
face with
the
the
Bajoran.
Yeah,
Kira.
Yeah.
but she's
No,
angry all the time.
I don't. I think she's old man. I think it's what's her face?
I
with the
think it's
scar?
Jadzia. Yeah, Dax.
Yeah, Dax.
But that's the problem though, because that was his mentor.
And the other thing is back, and I hate to go back to Superman because I was so past it, but neither one of you mentioned Jimmy Olsen, and he's on a ton of those lists for Superman's sidekick.
In all fairness, you're right. I mean, there was even a long-running series called Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen. But
And
I
I'm
think
not arguing with you. It's on a ton. It's another one of those. It's on many,
Yeah.
many lists, and it's for Superman. It's Jimmy Olsen. It's not the dog or Crypto, or I think those are the same thing.
they are. You just repeat. By the way,
I read some books.
and I'm gonna say this in a very controversial way, and I hope I don't offend anybody. But why would he name his dog Crypto? I mean, if it's after the planet Krypton, that's one thing, but that's also awful close to the thing that kills you. That
Yeah.
would be like,
Didn't the
you
dog
know,
have the name
and
already?
again, depending on what timeline you follow, because when I was reading Superman in early high school, because I was cool, who was the bartender?
So much muff, James.
Oh,
The bartender at the club that Superman hung out at for some
yeah,
this
reason.
week.
But anyway, he adopted a dog in
Bilbo.
honor of Yeah,
Bilbo.
Bilbo, you're absolutely right.
Oh God.
He in honor
I
of
pulled that
Superman
out of
named
your
the
ass,
dog.
but George,
Um,
poor George Papard.
well, one of them's important still. The other one's
No, I'm
dead.
sorry. It's
Uh,
Bibbo, not
Bibbo, it's
Bilbo.
Bibbo. You're right. I didn't think it was Bilbo, but I knew that's close.
Because
But
Bilbo is
Dude,
Lord of the
Bilbo
Rings.
barely gave up that ring, much less a drink.
Bibbo though, was a former boxer, owned a bar, and he adopted the dog in honor of Superman. In this happened in the mid to late '90s, and he names it Crypto. And I always thought, man, that's awful close to Kryptonite. Like, why would you? That would be like if there was a John Lennon themed hero, and he named his dog after the guy that shot him.
I have met pets named after foods. Hell, I got a cat named Pickles. But I ain't never, not once have I ever done damn seen a dog named Hey Earth.
Yeah,
Get
you
over
know what
here,
I mean.
Earth. Third planet from the sun. Get your waggy ass over here.
Oh,
I'm gonna send you in a northern orbit. I've never seen that. I've never heard it. And I've heard some wackadoodle names for pets.
So
so I've got a question then. Is our sticking point here
And I think a
really?
wackadoodle is an actual breed.
Um, well, I tell you what, if I learned anything from Roger Miller, I wish I had your happiness and you had a do wackadoo. Anyway, the point being is part of our problem here then saying that the problem with defining sidekicks out of the ones that are directly an archetype, Watson, Robin, etc., is that there's times when they're not. And so I was thinking if we use that same argument, is Fozzie a sidekick to Kermit?
Yes.
I have a hard time with that one.
I do too,
Yeah,
because
that one doesn't bother me as
He's an
bad.
individual character
he is an individual and he exists outside of, he doesn't.
because he doesn't do anything for Kermit, or he's just a character with the Muppets.
But he's the one that's closest to Kermit other than Piggy.
He's a friend. He's not a sidekick.
But I think a lot of these sidekicks to me are friends. It's like Walter Sobchak is on a lot of
Yeah,
these lists too from The Big Lebowski.
yeah.
And I
Oh,
get
see,
I
why
have a
we,
hard time viewing Walter as a sidekick
I don't view him as a sidekick either.
because he's the one that drives the action much more than the dude does.
We got to talk about two major sidekicks that we have not discussed yet,
go
and
ahead.
they're in the
Let's
same
go.
movie.
Yes.
We got to talk about Chewbacca and
And I was
R2D2.
going to say, and that's the thing too, because that actually goes back to the Tonto thing a little bit. Because man, Chewie saves Han a lot. For Han to claim that Chewie owes him a life debt, man,
Hmm.
Chewie does a lot of saving.
He does. I
He
agree
And
with
by the
you.
way,
does.
do you
They're
ever
both
think Chewie
sidekicks.
gets?
I just don't know that I agree with. And here's the reason why, as you know, because I read all those books, Star Wars books, so I am the utmost
Yeah, you
authority.
are the expert. If
I
only I
mean,
had read them, I could
if,
comment. I only
if
read the
only
ones
you
about
could read.
Lando Calrissian,
Come over here for some malt liquor. And
Who's
I
also a sidekick.
the
I
only sidekick to stand up to the Empire.
don't understand why it's always R2 and not 3PO. Why isn't it 3PO and R2? Because to me, they're both
See, that's the
sidekicks.
problem because, and see, that's what
What
I was going to
R2 is not the
initially.
sidekick to 3PO.
No, absolutely not. He's the sidekick to Skywalker, but I have a hard time. So, because C3PO, I was going to label him as a sidekick, but here's the thing: I always view him as just being there.
He's
Well,
a,
he's the one.
he
He's the voice, and
Yeah,
he's
he's
also
Falstaff. I mean,
basically, yeah.
if I want to Shakespeare this up, he's Falstaff. He's everywhere, so you have a point to jump on if you're a fan, or even if you're not a fan. There's that robot again. I'm comforted by knowing that robot's there. That makes sense now. I'm in this world. There's that robot, right?
Yeah,
yeah.
It's Falstaff,
R2D2.
one of the only characters that appeared in
He
multiple
actually
Shakespeare.
provides a function as a sidekick. C3PO, other than Return of the Jedi.
no, I disagree. I mean, he's the conduit for the audience. He's the speaker for the audience because nobody's going to know what the fuck R2's saying, and R2's humor
True.
doesn't work without 3PO
You got a point. You got a point.
But
because
I
the
think that,
jokes are at usually 3PO's expense.
Expense. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So if
You're right.
anything, 3PO's the sidekick to R2.
but
But
why?
my
And
only
now the audience mind is blown.
my only argument was when and I hate to even use them as an example because they're all shit. The first three, Um, the first
Episodes?
three, the first three episodes.
One, two, and
He,
three.
huh?
Yes. I'm just making sure I understand. It
Yeah,
sounds like
yeah,
I'm
I
being
know.
smart ass.
The
It's episode
prequels.
one, two, and three, right?
Three,
The
yeah.
prequels.
When
Okay.
C3PO wasn't there, he really wasn't overly needed because again, Anakin was providing C3P R2D2's voice. Um, so I
And
don't
other
know.
characters do it throughout the movie, Chad. I
Yeah,
mean, even
but yeah,
Luke does it a couple of times. You know,
but I get what you're saying.
but
If
Han provides
C3PO,
Chewie's voice.
hmm?
Han provides Chewie's voice.
Yeah,
I don't care what you smell. Get in there.
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, you're right. I guess you can see. Yeah, I understand.
So let
I
me
agree with
flip
you.
this around then, because I think so
I've
as
got the
I
greatest
mentioned
one of all
before on
time in
this
a minute
show,
anyway.
But it's
as
the
I
only
mentioned,
movie. It's the only movie I can really think of that has multiple sidekicks in one movie.
um, but yeah, I've mentioned this before on the show. Like I rewatch The Simpsons and I do a lot of cartoons for background noise because I have to work with noise and I usually do music. But if I'm at
I do
home,
cartoons
I'll do
too.
cartoons. And I've been rewatching for probably the seventh time. I just start at the beginning. I play it while I'm working, so it'll be 6 hours a day. I work more than that, but about 6 hours is all I take.
Nobody who you work with is listening who can give you a.
No, and I didn't think they were. I just don't want people to think I'm a lazy layabout. I wish I was. God, that'd be nice. Why am I not? That's a good question, me. We'll come back to you. Anyway, the point being, I've been Rick and Morty,
Yeah.
and I think Rick and Morty gives one of the best reasons why you have to have a sidekick. It
Which is
masks who you are. Literally, if you watch Rick and Morty and you watch them all, and I said probably six rewatch now, waiting for the new season. But there's an entire thing like Morty shields Rick. Literally, that's his purpose. Is that because his brain waves are so deficient, it hides the genius that is Rick, and that's the legitimate reason. So all of these things, and obviously that's a parody of Doc and Marty
go back to the
um,
future, James.
from
You ever
Back to the
seen it?
Future. Yeah, I've seen
You
it
ever
a couple
seen
times.
it? Okay,
I've
okay.
seen it a couple times. I really hope one day to have a better understanding of it. If only I was into merchandise and stuff.
Yeah,
I
that's
could have
actually kind
that
of
with
cool.
the clock tower. Anyway, yeah, my kids got that for me for Christmas.
That's
Anyway,
like being around.
but the point being, and I actually have the one that comes with the T-shirt where he's got the helmet on. Anyway, the point being, um, it's a parody of that because the joke was for a long time, why would a brilliant scientist that could invent time machine hang out with high school kids?
Hmm.
And so, but Rick and Morty addresses it that literally Morty provides him a literal human shield that makes him undetectable because his brainwaves are so off and so weird that it hides Rick's, which are also off and weird, but in the opposite direction. Um, and so I think about that sometimes, going back to the idea that Robin always wore bright colors, Batman wore darker, somber blues, blacks, grays. Um, is sometimes the purpose of the sidekick to hide the hero, to kind of
Yeah,
you know
or be the comedy relief. Back to the
Yeah.
same thing. They get all the good jokes, which leads me to my favorite. Which there's two. One is not so much funny, but the other one is Barney Fife is one of the probably the greatest sidekicks in television history,
because yeah, and actually you bring up an
and he
interesting
gets
point.
all the great jokes.
He does get all the great jokes, but he also becomes a villain really easy.
Yeah, because he's the most fallible. Andy can never be that fallible. Andy's always all smart. Andy
Yeah.
always and is never that interesting or is that funny as Barney.
No, there's probably three episodes I can think of where Andy does something wrong. There's the episode
Yeah,
where
and
he doesn't realize that Opie's helping the kid,
the kerosene pickles.
the kerosene pickle one.
What are you going to have? Well, you're going to have. Well, where I'm going to eat. And then the one where you're talking about where he's helping the other kid is you and Aunt B are having fried chicken, mashed potato,
Chicken.
blah, 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 yeah, yeah. What do
I'll
you
be
have,
having crow.
Paul? I'll be eating crow.
Yeah.
It fantastic.
Yep.
You talk about that's good writing.
Yeah. But it's because he thinks Opie is up to something. So, but and I said there's three that come to my mind, and I don't know how many episodes they made of that, but there's a lot. Um, but man, the episode where Barney gets a motorcycle, he becomes a villain immediately. I mean, Bart. So I think that's really interesting too. So maybe part of some sidekicks is that they're one step away from being the villain. Jason Todd, going back to Robin, his
Yeah.
Robin was one step away from being the villain. He was robbing the Batmobile. So is that what makes the sidekick more approachable or more real
It's
to some
definitely
people?
the thing that makes them slightly more interesting in a lot of these different shows, especially when it comes to comedy and melodrama, right?
I've got I've got another question for you then, because it's another one that comes to my mind. Is Jesse in Breaking Bad a sidekick?
I
I mean,
kind of
kind of, yeah. Because I want to say he's not, and he did get his own, but he kind of is the sidekick because he still goes along. He could, there was many times he could have gotten out from beneath Walter White,
Yeah,
right? You all agree with that?
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
he could have, may have
Walked
not
away.
been his, walked away, may have not have been his, the way he wanted to go, but he could have
Well,
gotten away
and
from
correct
all.
me if I'm wrong, but he even had the scene where I thought we were done. Right?
Yeah.
It's I want to say it's in the first season, maybe the second season. Listen, you wanted X amount of money, you have it.
Yeah.
We could quit, and it's Walter White that says, no, 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 we're going
Yep.
to keep going.
Yep.
And yeah, and
And then
so
there's a scene in later and I can't remember the later series where say we're done when I say we're done when he's almost went full.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so I think that's really interesting because there's a moment where it looks like if he followed the voice of reason, Jesse could have became the main character, so to speak. He could have been the hero,
Yeah.
and Walter White would have been the sidekick at that point. But it didn't go that way.
In the interest of time, it is getting towards an hour, so we're going to kind of wrap it up.
Yeah.
I'm sorry I hijacked this and made it not us going back and forth, but I just thought,
No, you
No, it
took
was
my
good.
idea. You took my idea and stole it from me.
well,
I think it's a great idea, and I'm proud of Chad.
I
Thank
am,
you.
I am. I think this. A matter of fact, I'll be
And
honest,
we've
Chad.
made this joke so often now, I
Uh,
actually don't quite remember whose idea it
of
was.
all the
Isn't it
ideas
wonderful?
Chad has ever had, this is the
But
best
it did remember, I did remember George Papard.
part. And
The
that's because Joe Lewis is George Papard's
Loves,
sidekick.
there's
loves
And
only
breakfast
there's
at
only
Tiffany's.
there's only two sidekicks I want to mention because they're the two best ones in the entire world. Pinky
oh, that's a good one.
and
But
Roger
Pink, oh, go ahead, sorry.
and Roger Rabbit.
And both of those, what I was going to say is both of those work because they're the one that humanizes, which is really funny because Eddie Valiant's the human,
Yeah,
but Roger Rabbit is what humanizes him.
Well,
right.
Roger Rabbit is his, it's like Edith is Archie's heart and soul.
Yeah,
Right.
So Roger's, it's the same. If people out there don't, of course, they're probably going to know Roger Rabbit before they'll know All in the Family. But don't you all think that? I mean, he's the heart.
yeah, and actually, I argue, and it's not on DVD. It's the episode that I want so bad. They put the first season, but not the second season. Archie's place, the second season, is where Edith dies. And
Hmm.
this first episode of the second season is the one I want on DVD because it is one of the most heart wrenching if you've watched the show. And Joe, you're absolutely right. Edith is his heart. It's his world. As
Hmm.
much as he belittles her and tells her to stifle, the episode where she passes away and it happens off screen and everything, but that entire 25 minutes, now it's 22, but it used to be 25, 25 minutes of that show is some of the best acting, and I love Carol O'Connor as Archie. He was a phenomenal actor throughout that part. But the episode where he has to confront that she's gone,
Hmm.
and it's about a third of that episode is shot one of the rare times you actually see their quote unquote bedroom, and him sitting on the edge of the bed for 8 minutes, just losing his mind and
Yeah.
going off and mad at her for being dead. And because he starts off really sad. You weren't supposed to do this to me. It was supposed to be me first. And it just builds. And by the end of it, he's angry. And then, and he's trying to use his anger, which is what he always does, to hide. And then he looks down and he sees when they took all her clothes, they left one of her slippers. And he
Hmm.
picks it up and he just breaks. It is one of the most powerful. So I think that's really interesting. It's the sidekick that humanizes. the thing. And then when we do see these sidekicks get lost or something happen to them, it does amp up the drama, right? I mean, Batman, when he lost Robin, it amped up the drama.
Yeah.
It
Well,
keeps him human.
the one last one I want to talk about is a sidekick that I think works better and is a more interesting character in the movie than it is the books, and that's Samwise Gamgee.
Yeah, he was on my
Yep.
list.
And truthfully, it's because of the acting and the performance. But if you've read Lord, and it's been 20 years since I've read Lord of the Rings, but in my recollection, Samwise is a more interesting character in the movie. What do you all think?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And
I
it's
mean,
because of Sean Astin.
yeah. Well, and and even though some of those same lines are in the book, you're right. It's
It's
Sean Astin. The
it's
way
Sean
he
Astin. It's the
verbalizes them,
performance.
that entire line about, and I can't quote it directly, but basically, we wish we lived in simpler times, but that's
Yeah,
not what we have.
they all do. Yeah.
Um, and so we're just going to have to do this. I think you're right. The ones that, since we didn't do the round robin thing, the ones that came to mind for me actually, again, much like you were talking about, Joe, are literary. Um, Sancho Panza.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Sancho Panza. I mean, because I think he's such a key sidekick because Don Quixote's not well,
Hmm.
but especially in the musical with Peter O'Toole, which is phenomenal, Man of La Mancha. He has an entire thing where, somebody says to him, like, you realize that's not a dragon, that's a windmill. He's crazy. Why are you? And he basically he does an entire song. I like him. I just like him. He does no harm. He's inherently good. He sees the best in everybody. Why would you not follow somebody like that?
Hmm.
Why would you follow a cynic? And the other one that came to mind, also literary, but based somewhat on, is it Dr. Raoul Duke?
Yeah.
One of God's own prototypes, never meant for mass production.
Yeah, yeah, that's one that works in the movie and in the book. Benicio does a really good job with that.
And it as crazy as everything that happens in that book and movie is, the the sidekick still keeps it somehow. I mean, he's crazier than
It
the
was in real
protagonist.
life.
Yeah, but it also I think it's because that works because he's so crazy that it makes the protagonist seem okay. Now he's weird, but he ain't that bad. And so
Yeah,
again, it has that humanizing effect on your protagonist. Fear and
yeah.
Loathing in Las Vegas fan base keeping score. So
All
that's
right.
sorry, that's the few that came to my mind. I'll shut up now.
Do we have any more? Is that it?
I There's one other one that came up on some lists, Joe, and you mentioned some lists. I
Hmm.
saw a couple lists because I usually don't look at lists too much, but a lot of them said Scooby Doo, and I have a problem with that.
Well,
I don't
because
think
Scooby-Doo is the lead character.
Yeah, I mean it's not called the Shaggy Show
Oh,
featuring. Like,
yeah.
you can't say Jabberjaw as the sidekick when the show is called Jabberjaw.
No, that doesn't. No, I agree. That's stupid. Actually, the couple I looked at that wasn't on there, but I'm shocked it wasn't because there were so many ones that I didn't agree with. But yeah, no, Scooby's not a sidekick.
The other one that I saw that I was like, I don't agree with it, but I also don't have a counterpoint. Was Kit Knight Rider? Is Kit the sidekick? And I'm like, no, Kit's the reason I watched the show.
Hmm.
But is he? I can see where they can make an argument for it.
Yeah,
I don't know.
but if hold on, Joe, let me end this episode on a cliffhanger. But Joe, if we go down that road, does that make Herbie the Love Bug a sidekick?
I'm so
Does
glad
that
he
make
didn't say
Speed
the.
Buggy? Does that make Speed Buggy a sidekick?
You know
What?
what? We could go down a road is, and we could do a whole other episode. What's the difference between a sidekick and just the second banana?
Well, one
Because
of
I
them
think
you could
some of
put
these
on a
people are just
banana
playing
split.
second banana actor
Oh
to
yeah,
the A actor.
yeah, fair enough. I don't know how
And
this episode's going to go over, but we got it done.
we got it done.
And
This is
I'm just glad to be Chad's sidekick.
I'm just glad that Chad was brave
Glory
enough
to the
to
Chad.
come up with this topic, send it
And that,
out.
and
We'd
now
all
we
agree
just
on it,
and I just came up with our next topic. You're welcome.
which is
Glory to Chad in his high Chadness. Low to the
Corn
Chad,
beavers.
where the Chad is good. Corn Beavers, this fall on Fox, starring Chad.